Oh, welcome today. Today is part 11 of our discussion on the Diamond Sutra, and it's September 24th, 2025. Our textbook is The Great Unfolding, the Diamond Sutra by Daehaeng Sunim. Today we're starting on chapter 13 on page 135. 저 125쪽입니다. Again, these chapter titles are pretty profound. The chapter title is Know that these teachings describe the underlying principles of how all things function and deeply engrave them in your heart. And so the very first question is from Subhuti. It's like, what should these teachings be called, and how should someone truly awaken and live accordingly? And it's kind of I'm not sure why he asked, what should these teachings be called? Maybe it's because I'm used to hearing them described as the Diamond Sutra, and maybe it's a technique for memorizing things for back in the days when people didn't have a lot of written texts. So if you had something, you had to memorize it. And so if you have a label or a category, it's a lot easier to remember it or to structure it. And he may have also been, it's possible there were other discussions among other disciples where they were talking among themselves and saying, oh, these are the teachings of the great emptiness or the great unhindered emptiness, or they're kind of giving it labels themselves. And Subhuti is hearing this and going, ooh, guys, this is a problem. And so he's posing a question to the Buddha, and it's not really a question. He's asking Buddha to address this topic for the sake of other people. I have a suspicion that may be what's going on here. And so the very first thing the Buddha says on page 127 is, these teachings are about the unsurpassed brightness, the supreme awakened state, so that if you thoroughly realize that one mind, the functioning of the whole as one, is unceasing and eternal, then everything you perceive and all that is unseen exist together non-dually. Then you will see that these teachings are everlasting. Although many labels are used, no names can ever truly describe these teachings. You must work to know them from the depths of one mind and engrave them in upon your heart and apply them to daily life. So what I think the Buddha is saying here is that these teachings are describing everything as one whole, right? As one flowing whole working together. And it's like, trying to think of a good example. It's indivisible. You can't chop pieces off, right? You can't say, this piece is like that, and that piece is like this, because it's one whole. You can't pull it apart and label it. I mean, the entire scientific method is based around pulling things apart and labeling them, right? But if I pull your arm off, you can kind of, we can come up with a label, but it makes a mess out of things, right? It destroys the thing. As it exists, there's nothing you can separate out. And to use the example of the pin, in an eye blink, in terms of geology, this was oil, just an eye blink ago. In the time it takes to take a deep breath, in terms of geology, this was algae. 100 million years ago, this was algae. And it sank to the bottom of the seas, and it got compressed, and over time it became oil. And then, 50 years ago or 5 years ago, somebody pumped the oil out of the ground, turned it into plastic, and made me this really handy pin. And in I'll use this as long as I can, but in a year or two, I'll probably have to throw it away. And then who knows what'll happen to it. And in 100 years, it'll be something else. Maybe oil, maybe ash, maybe carbon, whatever. But if I'm looking at this from the perspective of 100 million years, right, it's just like, ding, and it's just here and gone. And you can't say, oh, it's this. Because by the time you finish saying, oh, it's this, it's already gone, right? Oh, it's a pin. It's like, no, it's not. There's ash. Oh, no, the ash is gone. Oh, no, it's oil. No, the oil's gone. Oh, the algae's gone. There's no way to, there's no honest label, right? There's no true label that you can stick on it. And so much of this whole chapter is about these concepts. So, the very next paragraph, the Buddha says, I've used the words supreme perfect wisdom of emptiness, right? Prajna paramita, prajna paramid. I've used this word, but this is just a label, right? This is just skillful means to get you pointed in the right direction. I'm telling you to go to Busan, but Busan doesn't exist. There's no separate thing that you can label out. What you're thinking of as Busan isn't Busan. But I'm telling you there's Busan there because it's not untrue, but it's only a tiny part of reality, right? But it's what, if we're still stuck at a very dualistic way of perceiving things, then we need a dualistic teaching method, right? If I only know material things, then I need teaching that takes my perception or lack of perception into account. If I am completely focused on only emptiness, I can't explain how to practice to anybody else, right? If I can't explain to ordinary people what they should be doing because I don't have the words to put things in other terms. Well, there's this great emptiness, and they're like, well, yeah, but how does that help me with my wife and my kids? Right? How does that help me with my job? And just one aspect isn't the whole thing. And so this whole chapter, the structure, the organization is a little bit curious to me, and it makes me wonder about how Indians thought, or a little bit what else was going on in the structure. Because the next word is, do you think the teachings given by the Tathagata are the ultimate truth? And if you've met a truly awakened person, and it's very easy to say, yeah, I'd say that's very deeply true. But the first thing the Buddha's saying is, no, what I've taught you can't be labeled ultimate truth. Because ultimate truth is the label. It's ultimate truth by itself is a dualism, right? And what I'm talking about isn't dualistic. So ultimate truth is a handy label, but don't mistake that for the whole thing. Then on page 131, it's kind of interesting because the Buddha starts talking about dust. And part of me still doesn't understand why he's talking about dust. And it's like, Subhuti, if you look around the world, would you say there's a lot of dust? And this was first written down into Chinese characters about 1,500 years ago, or a little bit more, I think. And sometimes I wonder what people's perception of that word was at the time. because these word definitions change over time. And so it's doesn't always mean the same thing it means today. One of my favorite examples is when it comes to Wadu meditation. It said you need great faith, great effort, and great doubt. And the Hanmaum, the Chinese characters for doubt, are the same ones we use for doubt today. And that was, I'm afraid of displaying my ignorance by saying when that was written. But I'll just say that's 500 or 600 years ago that was written, maybe 700 years ago. But in English and in Korean, if you say doubt, it means skepticism, right? No, I don't think so. You know, the politicians say this is why they're doing things, but why are they really doing it? You know, in English nowadays, that's what doubt means. I don't think so. I don't think you really know what you're talking about. This is doubt. But in the Chinese characters for that have changed over time. And at the time, if you think about how Wadu meditation has to work, what they used to write as doubt, we would better say today as questioning. Great questioning. I want to know what this means. What does this mean? So if you have, some of the entire Diamond Sutra can be described as a Wadu in some ways, because it's very deep, and you have to be very careful about trying to say that you understand it intellectually, because your understanding can always get deeper. It's much better to try to do what it's saying. You don't have to do the whole thing, just the pieces. If you understand one piece, one idea of I can apply this idea. Just apply that one idea as diligently as you can. And as you do that, you'll gain more experiences and your perceptions will deepen greatly. And then you'll see the next step. Then you'll see another piece and just apply that piece. So it's a bit of a mistake to think you have to understand the whole thing. Just like I said, if there's one piece that clicks with you, push that as hard as you can. But so we have these use of words, and like I said, I have a little bit of a concern that the nuances may have changed from when the Chinese was first written. So when they say dust, are they really talking about dust particles, or was there perhaps a different usage? But that aside, the Buddha says to Subhuti, "What do you think, Subhuti? Throughout all the worlds of the many realms, would you say there's a law of dust?" This is page 131. Yes, world honored one, a vast amount. And Subhuti, Tathagata is telling you that all of that dust and all of those worlds are not two. Dust is just a label. World is just a label. Tathagata tells you that even worlds as people think of them do not exist. Those are just labels. So, if you look around, do you see a lot of dust, right? So this dust he's talking about isn't necessarily a teaching or a concept. It's what you're seeing. It's what you're perceiving. Your concept of this as dust versus your concept of the world. And this is, the word for world is also another word I suspect has changed. In Korean, it's called sege, and that's exactly the same. The Chinese characters are exactly the same. But I suspect it means the world, and to use the English expression, the world you know, right? Life in society, life in the world. Is in English, if we throw out the word world, at least I think of this blue marble in space, right? Planet. And I have a suspicion that most people, when they heard this, when this was written, didn't think of planet. They thought of everything around them. Maybe the heavens and the earth, but not a blue marble out in space, because they didn't. Maybe the enlightened people did see it that way, but probably most people didn't I don't think they perceived the concept of world like that. The world of your friends, the world of your relationships. I think this may have been a more common concept. But anyway, so here he's talking about perceptions. You perceive this as dust. And you perceive that as society or our country or our land. And that may be a better example. This is one little thing. This is our country or our land or our ethnic group. And the Buddha is saying those aren't two. I perceive this as being small and separate, and this is being big and huge. But when I say that, I'm unconsciously thinking, this is separate from this. And the Buddha is saying, no, both of those are just labels. You can't split those out from each other. It's like, in the old days, people didn't know about oxygen, right? They didn't know about nitrogen, and so they thought there was nothing between us. Now we're all a lot more educated, so we know there's this whole atmosphere, and it's pushing down a weight on top of us, and there's compressed air, there's compressed oxygen and nitrogen filling the space between us. So there's not a void between us, separating us. We're all kind of living in the soup, as it were. And I think that's one of these things that's going on here. And then, just for laughs, I shouldn't say that, but almost just for laughs, on page 133, the Buddha throws out a real zinger. He says, Subhuti, what do you think about the 32 marks of a Buddha? Is it possible to recognize Tathagata through those? So far, our examples of labels are truth, perfection of wisdom, dust in the world, and now all of a sudden, the Buddha drops the 32 marks of a Buddha, which, for those of you who might not know, these are an old series. They're from they're from a Buddhist text, but I think they probably parallel Indian culture or maybe Hindu culture. Hindu culture I don't think it really existed when the Buddha was teaching. I think it was called something else. But the culture of India at that time. So a great being, like a deeply enlightened being, would have these 32 characteristics. And so the Buddha was supposed to have a little bump on his head, and he was supposed to have long earlobes, right? And 32 or 33 teeth, I forget which. Might be, that's interesting, 32. A certain number of teeth, long fingers, and the Buddha didn't have body odor, right? The Buddha smelled really nice, which raises the slightly irreverent question of, if the Buddha took a dump, did it smell? And maybe somebody would have hit me with a big stick if I'd asked that back a long time ago. But all these characteristics. Oh, if you see these are the sign of an awakened person or a great being. One of them was the Buddha was supposed to have like a little piece of hair in the forehead that was like white, and shine, that light sometimes or something. And so, one of the first things the Buddha says is, no, you can't tell Buddha through those marks, right? Those things won't tell you if somebody's a Buddha. And part of the reason, because those are fixed manifestations, right? One of the things the Buddha is saying here is everything is a flowing whole. There's no fixed manifestation. There's no shape something takes every single time because it's a flowing whole. This has a shape right now of a pin, but it would be really hard to try to recreate this in the shape of another pin. You could try to melt it down and you could try to mess around with it, but the size would probably be smaller and it wouldn't be exactly the same. And if a Buddha had the same manifestations, right? If every Buddha had long earlobes, then you're saying there's something separate out there that's fixed. People might have said, okay, if I'm making a Buddha statue, a Buddha statue should have long earlobes, right? Or a Buddha statue should be gold in color. And that you can say that, but you can't say an awakened person or a truly awakened person has long earlobes or long fingers, because then you're saying they were born that way, right? Or they were born with some other shape and then they changed into that shape. You're trying to split off some sort of fixed manifestation, some sort of fixed label. And you're trying to chop this undivided whole into pieces. And the Buddha's saying, no, the manifestation of our true nature doesn't have a fixed shape. It doesn't take a fixed shape. It doesn't have a shape it always shows up in. If we talk about the Bodhisattva of compassion, if the Bodhisattva of compassion shows up, it's not going to show up with the same shape every single time, right? It's a manifestation of our fundamental mind, and I think I can say it manifests according to our own dimension and our own perceptions, and to a certain extent our own fixed ideas, right? If I'm expecting help to come in a certain shape, I tend to see it in that shape. Now this may cause me problems, because if I'm looking this way, I'm ignoring what's behind me. And I'm expecting help to come in this package and ignoring everything that doesn't fit that package. And there's a joke that's kind of a little bit old, very old, famous, everybody's heard it sort of joke. I don't know if you all have heard it, but a man is drowning and he asks Jesus for help. Please, Jesus, save me. And a boat comes by and the guy says, here, let me give you a hand. And the guy says, no, Jesus is going to save me. And they'll go away. Jesus is going to save me. And finally the guy gives up and goes away. Then a bigger boat comes along and says, here, let us help you. No, Jesus is going to save me. And finally a helicopter comes along. And the guy's like, no, Jesus is going to save me. You guys can go away. I'm fine. And finally he drowns. And then he winds up going to heaven. He's like, Jesus, how come you didn't save me? And Jesus said, I sent you a boat and a bigger boat and a helicopter. What are you talking about? I did my best. And this is a joke that Christians tell each other, so I'm not disparaging anybody. But the idea is you're looking for things with a certain fixed shape or in a certain fixed package, and not getting caught up in the labels. So that's one of the things that the Buddha is saying right away is let go of these labels, let go of these fixed shapes, Don't look for something in a certain fixed form. Okay. So we have some overlap on page 135. And the Buddha talks about this idea is that things aren't going to take the fixed shapes and labels you expect. So let go of those. So the Buddha says, Subhuti, if wise men and women should become one with one mind, then the non-dual aid they offer will transform and manifest according to the shapes and levels of awareness that are needed. Unlike good karma or good fortune, the virtue and merit of that will shine forever. Similarly, if someone awakens this utterly bright mind, which inherently contains all meanings of these verses, then with this luminous mind teaches and guides others non-dually, so that oneself and all others benefit, then unlike good karma or good fortune, the virtue and merit of that will shine forever. So we have, this is an interesting difference from the Chinese character original. But here where Daehaeng Sunim is talking about giving aid to somebody, she's talking about giving aid through mind, through this inherent connection we all share. So if I see somebody who needs help, I may think he needs this, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to entrust that situation inwardly. My friend looks very tired today. I hope he's doing okay. And just entrust that. And then maybe energy connects with him. Maybe I just have a hint or a feeling, oh, how you doing? Let me buy you a cup of coffee. Or something like this, whatever form it takes. But the thing is it's got to come from, we call this one mind, or the Buddha nature, or true self, or this inner light. When this inner light connects, then what arises is going to be really deeply true. And it may be me going and helping him. It may be just energy going back and forth. It may be this energy connecting with somebody else who goes and helps him. Right? There's no fixed form because, like I said, it's a dynamic whole. So again, it says it takes form takes shape according to the levels and awareness that are needed. If I'm a cup, if I'm a saucer this big, then no matter how much you want to give me a bucket of water, I can't handle it, right? If you give me more, if you pour a 5-liter bottle of water into this saucer, I'm going to have problems, right? It's going to go all over my book, it's going to go all over the floor, it's going to go all over my clothes, and just make a mess. If my capacity is only this big, that's all I can handle. And giving me more than that is not a blessing. We see that, the common example is money, right? If you're having a hard time and you really need help and $1,000 or $10,000 or $50,000 falls out of the sky and that's what you need, great. But we all know the stories about lottery winners, right? People who win $1 million or 10 million or more money, and in 3 or 4 or 5 years, they're bankrupt, or they're divorced, or their children died of a drug overdose, right? They just gave their kids, wow, lots of money. So they gave everybody they knew money, and their kids, died, or some other horrible thing. And something like 60+% of U.S. lottery winners, when they're surveyed 5 years later, said they wish they'd never won the lottery, right? If you had asked them beforehand, do you want to win the lottery? They'd be like, yes, please. That would be really helpful. But if something's more than our capacity, it's not going to help us. It's going to ruin us. And so, even though a deeply awakened person could explain how everything works, could even take away all of our bad karma, or delete, I don't know if that's the right word, save us from our current suffering. The problem is, where was I going to go? There's just so many things about that, because sometimes I'll get myself into deeper trouble if I didn't have that stuff going on right now. I need that hardship sometimes to grow and actually develop in a way that will leave me better off in the future. There's a lot of experiences we go through, and they may not have been fun experiences, but afterwards you're like, I'm never going to let that happen to me again, right? Okay, now I know what I want or what I don't want, or how to handle things wisely, and so that's not going to be a bother for me. And getting past that actually lets me move on to bigger things, to more useful things, more deeper things. Okay. All right, we're kind of running out of time here. The kind of the cool thing is, this line, let's see. This line, these last two lines, unlike good karma or fortune, the virtue and merit of that will shine forever. Right? So this is a distinction in Korean, kongdeok versus opposung. Kongdeok, we call this virtue and merit. It's a qualitative change. It's a qualitative benefit, whereas what gets called good karma or good fortune is more like just more of something. And there's an aspect to karma, and I'm not sure if this is why, but I think because karma is based on dualistic actions and perceptions, right? There's me giving you something, or there's me doing something to you. And so even if I want to ignore it, all the cells in my body know what I did, right? Even if I do something mean to you and you don't even know I did it, every single cell in my body knows I did this. So the karma of that action is inherent, was created the instant I did that. So even though I try to hide, there's nowhere I can hide from that. Even though you don't know what happened, even though I never tell anybody what happened, all the lives in my body are reacting to that. All the lives in my body are affected by that. If I'm behaving in a very dualistic or petty way or selfish way, then all the lives in my body just got taught to be dualistic and petty and selfish. And I just lowered my own spiritual level of awareness. I just taught like 10 billion first graders to behave badly, right? I taught 1 billion teenagers to behave badly. That's going to cause me problems, right? Whether anybody else finds out about it or not, this is just occurring to me that comparing all the cells in my body to teenagers, that's not a bad comparison in a way, because the thing about the cells in our body is they don't really know right from wrong. And teenagers have so much energy sometimes, they don't think about what's good for them or bad for them very clearly sometimes. And there's another aspect that, because it's based on dualistic actions and thought. I think it's also subject to dependent origination, like a cause and effect, or in some words, entropy. It has a cause, so it has an ending. It was dualistic in its very, very structure. So sooner or later, it's going to expire. If I helped you out, and I did it from a dualistic perspective, oh, he needs some help, let me go help him. And there's me, and there's him, and I'm helping him. Ooh, I did something really nice. That was pretty cool of me, right? We all have this feeling, and it's an okay feeling, but just make an effort to kind of relax that and let go of that. You don't need to criticize yourself or tear yourself down. Just, okay, that's cool. Let's just not dwell on that too much. But because there's that dualistic perspective, I think there's something about that that makes it conditioned, that makes it have a beginning and an end. And so karma comes and karma expires. But what we call virtue and merit in Korean Kongdeok is non-dualistic, right? Virtue and merit comes from, I see you suffering, and if he had $100, then that would really solve this problem he has. And it's like I'm suffering, I'm short $100, but I have $100 in this other pocket. So I just give myself this $100 that I need. That's the kind of non-dualistic helping, without any thinking about it. Oh, here, let me help you. You see this with family, with loved ones, right? With spouses or with children. If your child is throwing up in the middle of the night, there may be a little bit of, again, but you don't complain too much. You just quickly deal with it and help them out. And if they're hurting, you try to comfort them. And maybe it's just fatigue that does this, but there's not a lot of, oh, look what you made me do kind of stuff, at least among good parents. And so that's what we call virtue and merit. And that non-dualistic aspect qualitatively changes, I think, the consciousnesses of the lives within us. So it's like this 1 billion teenagers, you just qualitatively raised up their perspective into a non-dualistic way. And, things are going to go better if all the teenagers are behaving better. And as I can't claim that I know every reason for why this is, but Daehaeng is saying, no, that's permanent. That's forever. And it may be one of these things where once you see it from that perspective, you don't go back. Right? It's like, when I was little, I learned not to put my finger on the candle, on a lit candle, right? Because it hurt. And I haven't put my finger in a lit candle since then. I learned my lesson. That may be what we're talking about here. But we'll go ahead and stop here for today. And thank you all for coming on such a rainy, damp day.